so glad that you can be here today for what promises to be a very engaged discussion about the bicyclist perspectives on trails. Before we begin, I want to thank specifically Austin McInerney and Scott Bardobaugh, who have spent many volunteer hours thinking about this presentation and the ways that these discussions could be most effective. Unfortunately, Austin had a professional commitment that conflicted with today's meeting, so he's represented by Helena Gilbert-Snyder. So welcome, Helena. And just to get us started, we've got a few polling questions. Everyone loves a good poll. So Amanda, why don't you start the polling?
You should see a poll that popped up on your screen, and you just click on whichever options you like best. And then when you're done, you hit the end polling button at the bottom.
Disappeared.
It disappeared.
Yep.
Well, you know what? I might have to, sorry, I was letting people in. Go ahead and
It's back now.
try that again.
Yeah, you have to re-enter your votes. Sorry about
I'm
that.
sorry, everyone. That was me. I accidentally, I'm not able to click on it. So I said, oh, I'll just end the poll. I'm evidently the organizer. So enjoy.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
For the folks just joining us, welcome. We're doing a little polling just to get ourselves warmed up and start the meeting.
Amanda, are there 3 questions only? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We have all but 4 people's votes in, so we'll be ending it in just a few minutes.
It's hard to choose from several parks that I've actually gotten to work in, you guys. Naughty.
Yeah.
I tried to pick some that were, well, my favorites or ones that I wanted to go to also.
This is not a scientific survey or exhaustive. Right.
All right, we'll go ahead and give it like another 30 seconds. All right, let's go ahead and end the polling, and I will share the results. Devin, do you want me to go over the results, or would you like to?
Yeah, no, why don't you?
Okay. So the first question was, what is your favorite national park? The answer with the highest percentage was Yosemite. I'm not surprised. It's an awesome park that's nearby to the Bay Area that had 52% of the votes. I am surprised that Zion only had 2 votes though, because that is my absolute favorite. When was the last time that you were out on a park district trail? 48% of you said yesterday. Wow, I'm very impressed. 6 of you said this week, 4 said last week, and then 3 of you was 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then now that NASA has landed on Mars again, do you think there will be human habitation there in your lifetime? And 80% of you said no. And that is the results.
To break that down by age.
Mm.
You didn't have a choice for this morning for the parks.
Oh,
Ooh.
Oh my. You were up before me, Adele.
All right. So thanks, everyone. Devin, did you have anything else to say, or did you want to, you're ready to go? All right. Welcome again to our 3rd meeting, everyone. I'm Lou Hexter with MIG, and I'm the moderator, facilitator of our group, and appreciative of everybody's time this morning. I wanted to do a brief overview of our agenda, and just with the statement right up front that we do have a lot to cover, as always, and want to make sure that we focus as much time as possible in hearing from you and your ideas. So I'm going to talk about the agenda briefly, and we're going to just indicate where we think we can make up some time or compress some time so that our discussion groups will be where we will spend the most time this morning. Also, you'll notice that today is a 2-hour meeting. Our previous meetings have been 3 hours, and it has been our goal to try and get us to a 2-hour time frame, just in honor of everyone's volunteer time. So that's the framing for this today. I'm just going to review the agenda with you real quickly. I know that it was sent out in advance, but as we always do, we want to have a little welcome from the Park District and any announcements that are of note to the group. We also have a special guest this morning, Captain Lance Breed from the Public Safety Division, who's going to share with us some of the perspective that he and his team have as they monitor the trails for the district. We'll have a brief presentation from Sean about the working group survey results. You might recall that the survey was administered several months ago, and we were anxious to hear what folks on the working group had to say about a variety of things, and Sean will give us a few highlights there. I also, as a standing agenda item, we wanted to just reflect on our previous meeting for those who maybe weren't there, or for those that were, and it's been a few months, just to remind us kind of what was developed in that session, and just a reminder about the shared resources. It's a great web page that the district is sponsoring for us as the working group, and it's a place where we can share resources. The bicyclist perspective is our focus for this meeting, and as usual, we have just a brief presentation or framing from the district on maybe some history about the bike use on trails here. And we turn it over to a couple of folks, Scott Bartlebaugh and Helen Gilbert-Snyder, for their presentation of perspectives on the issues and goals that and experiences that bicyclists have, just as a primer or a priming the pump for our conversations. On the breakout group discussions, 35 to hopefully a little bit more if we can make up some time here. As we typically like to do, just getting from everybody a sense of relating to the experience of this perspective, and what some of the issues are, and what we think might be some potential solutions to resolve those issues. And also importantly, today we're asking, to think about what role your group could play in some of these solutions. So whether you are an actual bike affiliated with some bike group or some other kind of group, what role do you envision your group might play? So those are our 3 breakout group questions. And then at the end, again, we like to just give you an advance notice on our future meetings and share with you or allow for sharing of any member announcements. So that's how we've organized today. And if I forgot anything, we'll make sure that we mention it. Okay. With that, let me just turn it over to Brian for a few announcements, and we'll just launch right in.
Great, thanks, Lou. And if you could stop sharing, that would be great. Devin or Amanda, whoever, if you could make me host so I could share my screen, that would be good. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails, and GIS at the Park District. Really appreciate everybody taking the time to be here. Such a lot of experience and a lot of different perspectives in this group. So absolutely appreciate it. I did just want to reflect real quick on some of what's going on at the Park District. So as we discussed last time, the Park District has seen huge increases in our park use, our trail use. I'm sure those of you who've all been out on the trails have recognized that, have seen that. So we continue to manage that. We continue to manage that with the same staff that we've always had. So it continues to be a challenge, but we also are excited about the opportunities of so many new people discovering our parks and engaging in them. As many of you know, we're going through a bit of a transition here in that our general manager, our longtime general manager, Bob Doyle, just recently retired. And actually, I want to try to share something with you here real quick. I'm going to share my screen. Is everybody able to see this map? Can I get a verbal yes?
Yes.
Yes.
This is a map we developed of Bob Doyle's time at the Park District. What was green was acquired before. And then all of the acquisitions during his time, you can see 1990, 1991. Just the real growth of the Park District while Bob was Chief of Land Acquisition and then AGM of Land Acquisition up to 1986 to 2010. So you can see just a significant amount of growth, 47,000 acres during that time. Really impressive conservation legacy on Bob's part. And then as we see coming up here in 2010 is when Bob became general manager, and you can start to see in orange the additional acquisitions that happened during his time as general manager. So an additional 18,000 acres that were acquired during that period. So just wanted to share that just real quick. One, it's highlights just Bob's significant legacy, highlights that we are going to be entering into a new era at the Park District with Bob's retirement and selection of a new general manager who has not been named yet. So we're recognizing that, but it also points to just, you know, some of the part of the reason why we're here. We've acquired so much land that we need to figure out how to safely and sustainably open up those lands to the public who invested in it. How do we manage increasing trail use and meet the demands of our users to be able to provide access to those areas, and how we protect the resources in there. So that's why we're here. I do want to emphasize, you know, this group is not established to identify and make policy for the Park District. That's the role of the Park Advisory Committee and our board of directors. We have heard coming into this meeting, definitely a lot of concern about trail conflict and concerns about e-bikes. And both of those topics are topics that our Park Advisory Committee has on their work plan for this year to discuss. I know it'll come up here, and that's fine. That's part of the conversation. But what we do want to focus on is solutions. You know, what are the things that we can do to continue to accommodate the demands in our parklands and protect our resources? So these are, you know, solutions like identifying, you know, potentially alternative use days where perhaps equestrians are allowed on certain trails some days and bikes are allowed in others. Or, you know, is it designating single-use trails, or simply building more trails, or any number of different solutions. Or it could be, you know, I know there might be some who would like to see more restricted access. But that's what we're here to talk about. I did want to invite Captain Lance Breed to just give his perspective real quick in terms of what he is seeing in the field with regards to trail conflicts, how our public safety department handles those, and really what you all can do in terms of encouraging your user groups to make sure those are reported and that they're known to the district. So with that, Captain Breed.
Thanks, Brian. First of all, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Lance Breed. I'm the police captain in charge of patrol operations. I've been with the district going on 28 years. During that time, as Brian just touched on, there's been a lot of growth. I think there was just over 60,000 acres when I started in '93, and now we're up to, you know, over 120,000 acres. So with that leads to a lot of potential issues and a lot of potential conflicts. One person I'd also like to recognize, part of my team, is Lieutenant David Phelps, who's also with us today. He has a wealth of experience with the district as well. So he's going to be sitting in on at the beginning of this meeting as well. So he's available for any questions if anyone has them. So as Brian touched on, we've seen a huge increase over the last year. On average, we see about 28 million visitors a year in the Park District. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've seen somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 50% increase. And obviously those numbers aren't hard numbers, but that's just, you know, basically what we're seeing just on the sheer volume and patron load that we're seeing in all of these different communities, not just trail related, but parking related issues. We touch 33 different cities in the 2 counties. So with that, there's a ton of related issues that come up as well, not just on the trails, but particularly with trail conflicts. With that increased patron load, we have seen an increase in dog versus dog violations, dog versus horse, bike versus dog, bike versus hiker, so on and so forth. Obviously, with more people on the trails, more people want to use them, a whole new user group that's out there that are now discovering the regional parks that are in their backyards. Those are issues that we're having to address. With those 73 parks and 1,300 miles of trails, we're still having to address those trail conflicts with the same number of officers. We're allotted 73 officers for the department. With that, we're down 10. That doesn't mean that we're not out there enforcing Ordinance 38 and doing the best we can with the resources we have. But you can imagine, with that many parks and that many miles of trails, on a daily average, we have a sergeant and 4 to 5 officers to cover the entire park district. So as we get calls for service, we get our officers out to those calls as quickly as possible to address any of those issues. But we really rely on our partners in park operations and stewardship, this group, to get feedback, so then we can do what we call targeted enforcement. And what I mean by targeted enforcement is, if we get continued information regarding issues at specific parks and different times of day, we will send officers out there to see if we can address those issues or catch someone violating the rules as it's been reported. A lot of the violations that we see are obviously what we call infractions, low-level violations. So an officer actually has to witness those to be able to give a citation. So as you can imagine, with the sheer volume and sheer vastness of the district, and with the resources we have on the street, to get officers out in the middle of parks to catch someone on a trail, either violating the speed limit for bikes, or someone having a dog off leash in a grazing area with cattle, all of those things are tough. We rely heavily on our volunteers to get out there and help educate the public, because that's a big thing, is educating the public on the rules and regulations so we don't have these violations. Unfortunately, since the beginning of the pandemic, we have not been able to use our 260 plus volunteers to get out in the parks. We're hoping to get them back out there once we get back into the yellow tier, but that's something for not only the safety of our volunteers, safety of the park patrons, to follow the rules and guidelines as set forth by the CDC, and social distancing and mask wearing and all those things. I'd also like to just quickly touch on, over the last year, one of the things that Devin and I have worked on. I got him some of the information related to statistics and really low number of bike-related violations that have been cited. I believe off the top of my head, it's less than 15 for the entire district. And that goes back to what I just touched on. We get a low number of actual calls, people reporting violations, but also when our officers are in the park and they're looking for the violations, they're not occurring. So you just keep that in mind as we move forward. Also, Brian touched on some of the things that we're looking at for best practices. We always continue to evaluate other agencies to see how they're doing it, how they're utilizing their trail systems. And we continue to do that in this group, and we're continuing to evaluate that. So that's something that we'll continue to do moving forward. With that, I'll turn it back over to Brian.
Great, thank you very much, Captain Breed, and that's I think really all I have to say. I'm just going to close on this, is that mentioned the growth of the park district and the increase of use, and I think it's important for us to also acknowledge that fully 1/3 of the park district's 120,000 acres are in land bank status. Those are not open to the public, and that is something that we all need to collectively work to open up these parklands to the public who've invested in them. And we need to do it in a sustainable way that protects the resources. We need to design and build and provide the facilities that work for our users, and make for a safe and welcoming and sustainable trail experience for all. And so that's why we're here, and that's what we're working for. So with that, I will turn it back over. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brian, and thanks, Captain Breed, very much for your remarks. Want to keep us on task as much as possible. So Sean, I'm going to turn it over to you for just a few highlights from the working group survey.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everyone. First, I just want to thank you all for the 25 of you that filled out this survey. We put some thought into it, but it is, with surveys, it is the type of thing that we'll continue to look at these questions. And the questions were kind of geared towards some of the management elements that the Park District thinks about. The purpose of the survey was kind of get this group thinking about some of those elements. To find some commonality and some trends within this group was my hope. And also it's kind of a test run that we're sharing with you as a survey that we may decide to release to the general public at some point, which is why I'd like to encourage anyone who has in this group who has comments or suggested questions within that to be included in a survey that would be released to the general public. Offline today, we don't have time to talk about it now, but go ahead and send your suggestions to Devin or I, and we can include those in our further development of surveys. I will say that you know what the survey showed really, again, it was only 25 of you, so it's a very small sample size. One thing it did solidify for me is that we have captured the ends of the spectrum as far as the debate around trail use and what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed on our narrower trails, trails less than 8 feet, we'll say. So everyone's very much in their camp with their answers. So not surprising there. In finding commonality, though, I would say that, well, I'll just report a few of the things and then we'll move on. But so 16 folks, or 64% of the respondents, are satisfied with our current trail system, and 9 or 36% are not. And there, if you want to look at the actual answers, the open-ended answers are on our Trail User Working Group website, and you can read through some of the reasons why and why not. We ask questions like, what's your favorite trail access? What's your favorite thing to do on trails? When you use our trails, who do you do it with? What time of day do you like to do it? Things like that. You can read through there. It was very interesting for me to hear about people's favorite access points and why, mainly because trying to identify hotspots or places where everyone agrees this is the place I like to go. Those are the kinds of places where we really need to take a look at the Park District from a parking perspective, from a user conflict perspective. So that's where that question stemmed from. It looks like the majority of the respondents like to use the trails in the morning, but really just a little less of that is like people like to use it in the afternoon. And some of the answers were, it depends on the weather. So, that question, maybe a better question is, what day of the week do you prefer to use the trails? So maybe that's a good suggestion. The majority of you do travel some distance to get to our trails. And that's important for the Park District to think about when we're working with public transit agencies and trying to figure out how people get to our parks. Again, parking, an issue. 75% of the respondents prefer trails that are narrower than 8 feet. So basically trails, not roads. I found that interesting, and it's kind of what we hear in general, and that's what we're talking about in this group. So it was interesting to read that. Signage seems unanimous almost that signage could be improved in the Park District. So that to me was something that helpful that came out of this. And when it comes to trail etiquette, it looks like the group's split in that folks think people are familiar with trail etiquette, which is, just, it's not rules in Ordinance 38, it's how we behave, how we share the trails, how we're leaving no trace or not, right? And so it's kind of split, but majority of the respondents have actually had that discussion with others about trail etiquette. And this is something that I think that is useful to continue to develop this. Our public affairs department is looking into some trail etiquette publications and videos, and we'll be connecting with this group as those get developed. As Captain Breed said, there's people in the park right now that need to learn these things. that may not even know what trail etiquette is, right? So it's more important than ever to kind of spread that message. So again, we're welcoming any suggestions on the questions, and if you want to discuss anything further, we're happy to. But that's kind of an overview, and thanks again for taking the survey.
All right, great. Thanks. Well, we're just about done with presentations for this morning. I know everybody's anxious to get into our discussion. I just wanted to call attention to everybody about or remind folks about the meeting that we had last time back in November. We focused on the hiker's perspective and had a chance to hear a presentation from a couple of representatives from hiking groups as a launching pad for our discussion, and went into small groups and had an opportunity to discuss what people experience out there as hikers, what some of the conflicts are, and as we've been saying, most importantly, what some of the potential strategies are for making the experience better for everyone. And the notes themselves that were captured are on the Trail Users Working Group webpage. I hope everybody's got that bookmarked by now. If you haven't, make sure you do that sometime today. It's in addition to the notes from each of these meetings, we've been collecting resources that members of the group would like to share, and they're organized by user type and reference persons groups. Like we have the Bay Area Ridge Trail Council represented there. We have Sierra Club represented, and many of the user groups have shared with us some important documents that I think are really helpful to the conversation. So that way we are availing ourselves of the great expertise that exists on the membership of this group, as well as beyond this group, to make sure that we're being really thoughtful and considerate of all potential opportunities. So I wanted to just call your attention to that page again. It's just found by going to the East Bay Regional Park District, and in the search bar you can type in Trail User Working Group and it'll take you right to that page. So before we launch into the biker's perspective portion of today, you've heard from a lot of folks. I wondered if there are any burning questions for any of the presenters so far that you'd like to ask. If you don't need a direct response right now, you can type the question into the chat. We'll make sure that those questions are answered. If you'd like to participate in the conversation, I see a hand up already. Jim anticipated this. Just use the raise hand feature. It's a little difficult for me to scan the thumbnails of you to see if you're raising your hand. So we'll use that. And let's keep to just a couple of questions here so we can launch into our discussion. So Jim, what did you want to say or ask?
Thank you, Lou. Yeah, I noticed just in reading the surveys and so forth from the last meeting and some of our breakout, that in fact that whole discussion about narrow trails appears to be a very important one, and certainly with hiking and equestrian and environmental is one. And so we just wanted to see if that, well, we'd like to see it as an agenda item. I think it's worthwhile. The discussion of the narrow multi-use trails for all proposal, the e-bikes that were mentioned, including a legal analysis from the district, I think would help. And just, then be able to really focus on solutions that make it work for all of us, because I think that's what we're all after. So just wanted to kind of follow up to see how that might be scheduled on the agenda. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Also, I meant to mention that in the notes, there were captured a number of potential solutions, and we don't want to lose those. And what I wanted to assure you is that as we move along, we are collecting these ideas and possible strategies, and towards the end of our conversations, we'll be bringing all of those back to you in a way that you can look through them, and we can have a conversation about which of the strategies gains a high level of support from this particular group. So we want to be able to, as we wrap things up and deliver our reports and recommendations, we want to be able to reflect on those possible strategies. let's see, and okay, Morris sent in the chat, yes, to add documents to the webpage. If you have something you'd like to share with the group, send it to Devin. Thanks. Okay, Norman, I see your hand up, and then I think we'd like to move into the bike presentations. Yes.
I would like to do that too. I'd just like to note that a number of us following the last meeting sent a memo to the Park District, to Brian and you all, that we wanted to have shared with the whole group, but that apparently hasn't been done. So we'd like to have that. We'd like to have that sent out to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Right, and Norm, can you characterize what was in that communication, and maybe Devin and Brian can say something about what was done?
Well, it was identifying what we felt to be critical issues that need to be addressed on this topic of narrow trails and narrow trails for all, and is really from perspective of a number of us, the real issues that need to be discussed at length in this kind of setting, because it's not going to just be a 1-2 hour session dealing with those kinds of questions.
Yeah, Norman, I think I did send that to the full group, and certainly if there's something else that I need to send, forward it on, we'll send it along. And I think, really what both you and Jim have mentioned is at the heart of this whole group. That's it. From my perspective, that is the agenda item. But I'll also mention, like I say, the PAC is looking to take up conversations around trail access and mountain biking and e-bikes as well. So it's an ongoing conversation in multiple forums.
Well, I would just say I apologize if I missed it. I didn't see it in the materials, but if it was sent out, then great, thank you.
Morris, I think I see your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that obviously the issue of narrow trails and multi-use on them is important and critical to our discussions, but we have to remember that our mission in this group is to focus on the new trails that are going to be built over the next years. And so if we're going to be discussing narrow trails, rather than discussing, or focusing on the current situation, we want to focus on how the current situation looks towards what we do in the future on future trails. And so that should be prominent in our minds when we don't raise issues just to complain about what's going on, but on how it might influence what we do in the future.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right, I see the chat is getting a lot of activity. Please continue to use that as a way to alert staff and the facilitator about issues you'd like to communicate about, and we'll try to be responsive there. Keeping us on our agenda, let's talk about the bicyclist perspective. That's our focus for this session. And to kick us off with some framing from the Park District perspective, Sean, and then we'll hear from our two presenters.
Thanks, Lou, and thanks to everyone for your suggestions and comments. We'll keep this brief. You may all know this, but I don't want to steal. The whole point is to just hear the bicyclist perspective today and have the. I will just say that mountain biking is continuing to increase in popularity. We see it on our trails and in California in general. It was sort of formed, or I guess pioneered in 1970s and 1980s right here in the Bay Area in Marin County. At least it's said to have. It became globally recognized as a sport in the 90s. So adults that were into this sport during that time period may now be grandparents in their 60s. Children that got introduced to it during that time and from then on are now adults with children, and so it's just exponentially growing in popularity. The range of mountain bikes, from the 90s on, they range from sort of lightweight race bikes to very large, full suspension downhill bikes. The range of riders that we see, you know, that in the sport, not necessarily in the park district, but in the sport, you have your families and with kids who are just on a bike ride on dirt, to folks wearing full armor and face masks. And so we have to keep in mind that there is a range, and that it's highly likely, in fact, almost impossible to accommodate that entire range everywhere. The cost of a bike ranges anywhere from under $1,000. Folks can find them for under $1,000 to now they're over $6,000. So almost vehicle. Let's see. During 2020, Forbes magazine reported 117% increase in sales in April and May of 2020 compared to 2019. You cannot find a spot in a bike shop right now to even repair your bike if you wanted to. They're several months out booked. So the pandemic, on top of this already being a growing sport, has exacerbated the use. So we're seeing a lot more of it. At this point, it's clear that it's not going away. And we want to talk about how mountain biking can be accommodated in the park district, not a question of if it should be at this point. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Notification. So you're all familiar with this graph here, or pie chart. We've seen it before. We have 1,330 miles of trail, mostly unpaved roads. And we are focusing in this group really on these unpaved trails, the trails that are less than 8 feet wide, what many of you are calling the narrow trails. This is the 200 miles. And within that pie piece, currently 50 miles is open to bikes. And sorry, let me minimize my screen here. Can you all still see this? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Apparently, when I share my screen, I can't also minimize my Zoom, which is fun. So where those bikes are allowed, currently, the Park District rule basically is that bikes are not allowed on narrow trails, except for the exceptions in Ordinance 38, which you see here on the left is attachment A. Ordinance 38 is also available. The entire
document
ordinance, thank you, is a link there. Section 409 is the section that you want to focus on if you were looking for bike rules. You see here, this is the 50 miles that allow it currently. Ordinance 38 also prohibits bicycles in certain areas completely, and that's down below here. You see that they're not permitted, like on the Ohlone Wilderness Trail, Huckleberry Regional Preserve, things like that, places like that rather. I would love to show you. So here's what we have as our trail etiquette in our bicycle brochure right now. This we can post. I believe it is posted on our also on the Trail User Working Group page. And you can see here, it's kind of like a leave no trace. You shouldn't ride on wet and muddy trails. Control your bike. Get off the trail. Yield to others. So you see on the right here, this is a typical sign you'll see. Bikes are supposed to yield to everyone else on the trail. Everyone is supposed to yield to horses on the trail, and that's something that may not be known by all. Then I'm gonna escape out of here. Stop sharing my screen. So I'm just gonna go through real quickly what our ordinance does say. Okay. So this ordinance is currently being updated. We update it every 2 years. In 2021, the board will adopt new rules and suggestions for changes in that. So that's ongoing right now. The board, I should say though, can update and change Ordinance 38 at any time. But what we choose to do is every 2 years for process. So again, I mentioned section 409. It talks about personal conveyances and it talks about bikes. Just so you know the difference, personal conveyances is a roller skate, rollerblade, unicycle, skateboard, mountain board, something that is human powered that has wheeled, or maybe not have wheeled, like I don't know, a pogo stick could be a personal conveyance. We're not talking about that. We're talking about bicycles, which is considered a 2 or 3-wheeled vehicle propelled by the use of human power. And this includes road bikes, mountain bikes, BMX bikes, or similar devices. So I'll paraphrase a few of the rules that we have now. Firstly, it's unlawful to ride or operate any bicycle in the park district in a negligent or unsafe or reckless manner that endangers life, limb, or property of the person or violates the California Vehicle Code. It's unlawful to ride a bike any place in the district at excessive speeds when they're posted. Our posted speeds are 15 miles an hour in most places, and unless otherwise stated. Also, when passing other trail users or in very crowded areas with short sight distances, or anything irresponsible deemed by our, the public safety or involved. Bicycles are permitted on paved roads, paved bike trails, unpaved roads, fire roads over 8 feet, and multi-use trails unless otherwise posted. And the multi-use trails are those trails in attachment A. Bicycles are not permitted on hiking or riding trails except those specifically designated in that. They're not permitted to ride across country. Our operations can close bike trails if they're unsafe at any time, and the board gets to vote, has the power to vote if that's permanent or not. So that's important to know. If a trail becomes a major problem, their closure is an option, but probably the last choice. They should not ride it faster than 15 miles per hour. And this is interesting here too. Something that I read is that bicycles must travel in a single file when passing others, and in a single file on the right side of the trail when in turns, blind corners, or when being passed. And this is interesting to me because that may not always be the best way to pass, especially if you're passing a horse, for instance, and you should be passing on the correct side that does not spook the horse. And so these are all things that we can think about. Required equipment. Lastly, if you're traveling at night, ride with a helmet and a light. A helmet if you're under 18. And I mentioned the trail etiquette before. So for that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to the group. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of our current rules, and please feel free to read Ordinance 38 on our website. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, we're running just a few minutes behind, so I'm going to ask Scott Bartlebaugh and Helen to launch into their presentation. Thank you so much for volunteering to carry this part of the agenda. Scott?
All right.
Or Helen?
All right, I'm working on getting sharing up.
We can see it.
Can you, you can see it?
Yes.
Can you still see it?
Yes.
Okay. It should be full screen.
Full screen.
All right. So, all right. As either Devin or Lou mentioned, Austin's not able to be here today, but Helen Gilbert Snyder, who is a coach with the El Cerrito High School mountain bike team, is here today. She, in addition to being a coach and a mountain bike rider, she's an equestrian and a runner as far as being a trail user. We hope you're able to open your mind today and try to understand our perspective. Okay, there we go. You can read the bullet points, but the parks are a shared public resource, and there's a broad spectrum of desired trail experiences as reflected by the broad membership in this working group. I mean, with that, we still have a lot of things in common in what we all want out of the trails, and that commonality is pretty large. So we're hoping that we can draw on that and we can come together on those points that are common. most people who mountain bike also experience the park in other ways as well. They're not solely mountain bikers. Many of them are often hikers, runners, or dog walkers, and sometimes even equestrians. So they do have some understanding of other users' perspectives, but nobody fully understands everybody's perspective. So we are hoping to learn more about that. We don't think we know it all, and we definitely think we have more to learn. So that is one thing we hope to take away from the working group. And the desired outcome, we are looking for better trail experiences for everybody in the parks. We're not just after our own special interest. We really want it to be better for everybody out there, as they are a shared public resource. And Helen?
Yes. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me today. On this slide, I want to discuss a little bit of what cyclists are looking for. You know, we're seeking adventure, a place to play, a place to be away from other people. We hate trail conflict as much as anyone else. We want a place to challenge ourselves and a place to enjoy the outdoors. As part of that, we are looking for sustainable, safe, and rideable trails. Steep fire roads with ruts and holes from cow hooves can be dangerous and also just simply impassable for our newer and younger riders. We also do want to protect, native plants and animals, have more local narrow trail access that does help facilitate slower, safer, and more sustainable everyday bike activity. With more access to narrow trails and just the access we have now, we are looking for more trail work opportunity. There are so many resources available to guide trail maintenance and environmental sustainability. And right now, there are hundreds of cyclists, as you guys have seen, both youth and adult, who would be happy to do their part for trail upkeep. You can kind of think about the experiences we're looking for by imagining being on a country road instead of a freeway, or running on the trail instead of a track. We seek the similar types of enjoyment. Scott.
Helen, I think you're up for the first part.
Yep. And look, we do recognize the dangers. I personally understand that cyclists can spook horses, even if all parties are well-meaning. And like, any group, some cyclists are disrespectful, which reflects poorly on all of us. Furthermore, trails built without oversight and approval can risk environmental damage.
We also recognize that bikes can be quiet and startling. When I'm hiking and a bike comes up behind me and they're unannounced and they don't ring a bell, sometimes it scares the crap out of me. And I get it, as I'm a cyclist, but I can see where somebody who doesn't understand that, that is very, very unnerving. But there are ways to address that. The popularity and immense growth is definitely adding to trail congestion. We take horse incidents very seriously. We understand those consequences can be extreme, and we don't take that lightly. It's a significant issue. As we look at these bullet points, we could substitute in hikers, dog walkers, or equestrians into many of these points. So there is some commonality there as well. There are a range of cyclist perspectives, and Sean alluded to that somewhat, that there is a range. At one end of the spectrum, we've got cyclists that they toe the line, they follow the rules 100%, they honor closures. They share the trail, they yield to all, and respect others. They advocate within the public process. They look to form alliances with other users, and they accept that it's a long public process. They take a look at the trail access and the trails built at Crockett Hills, and they're very glad they're there. It's a nice system. It's a great start. There's a lot of users or cyclists at this end of the spectrum. There are many that have this viewpoint. The view starts to change through the spectrum. Cyclists see other land managers that have succeeded more so with bike access than we see here. Cyclists also see that there appears to have been relatively little change in 35 years within our district. They see cattle getting priority over trail quality, that we have trails that get trampled by the cow hooves, and measures aren't taken to try to reduce that. At some point, some cyclists look and they're not seeing advocacy being able to affect change. It looks like the public process doesn't work. They see staff doing thorough environmental review and good land use planning, and they don't always see that being supported. Most cyclists don't see Crockett Hills as a quote unquote bike park, and particularly not as an extreme bike park. That view is shared by some users across other user groups, but generally cyclists don't view it that way. They are glad to see it, but it is not an extreme bike experience. Cyclists don't generally see technically challenging trails in the trails that are open to them. There is a portion of the spectrum that is looking for that type of experience. They don't see any bike-only trails currently. It's all shared access. They see taxes being spent on enforcement rather than on access. It appears that new narrow trails have not been a high priority for the district. The district does a great job at land acquisition. But as was stated earlier, there's a large amount of land that's in land bank that's not available. And narrow trail development, 12.5 years since 1995, has been very, very low. And at the very farthest end of the spectrum, there are some cyclists that look at the cumulative situation and they see little to lose. So they ride closed trails and they build social trails. So it is a very broad spectrum, and there are good things going on there, and there are many cyclists that appreciate them. But again, it is a broad spectrum. And I don't know what the exact distribution of that is, but hopefully this gives you a better feel for the various perspectives on it.
Great. Is that the end of your presentation, Scott?
No.
Oh, okay.
We have.
There we go. Okay.
3 more slides, I believe. Yes, 3 more.
Great.
So, Helen, you're up.
Yep. But there are options for improving the situation. First you can start with what's somewhat happening now is, doing a district-wide trail review and master plan, see where adjustments can be made, and what's working well and what's not. Continue educating cyclists and other trail user groups. While not every video or PSA will be as perfect as everyone may like, there are honest efforts to improve everyone's experiences, and we can always make more videos until everyone's happy. Third, we can look into signage such as uphill or downhill use to decrease congestion and limit conflict. Scott?
Okay. Other options include trails that are designed and well built. Most of the trail system that exists today was not built with cyclists in mind. With new users, education is even more important, and the explosion during COVID has amplified this even further. The trail overload is, as we've heard today, resulting in high conflict. There are many management tools that could be used, and we've got some of those listed there. The videos that we sent out in the links, that we asked you to watch, they're not perfect, but they are an effort by the mountain bike community to educate, to be responsible, to be respectful of other users, and improve the experience for all trail users. So we are trying to come to the table and make the situation better, and we can improve. Solutions, some of these that are listed here, have been demonstrated by other land managers nearby. John Muir Land Trust has shown that they quickly open properties, and they've generally included modest additions of multi-use trails. Santa Cruz, Napa County, Mid-Peninsula Open Space are other places where they've had good success. In Marin County, Bill's Trail is an example of a trail that was reworked, redesigned with speed controlling features and improved sightlines to improve the experience of all trail users and provide access to cyclists.
Finally, kids. Some of you probably have some, I don't. As many of you may notice, the makeup of park users has shifted dramatically. The East Bay Regional Park District region has well over 500 youth who participate on middle and high school mountain bike race teams, and it's growing exponentially, not linearly, looking at 20% increases every year. These kids love exploring. They love the physical exercise from bikes, and as both a coach and a rider, I can attest to the mental health benefits it brings. None of these kids enjoy trail conflict. None of them enjoy feeling like they don't belong. We do have a window of opportunity right now to create this new generation of park stewards who will be part of these parks for the next half century. We can do this by educating on trail etiquette, by demonstrating thoughtful methods to reduce user conflict, whether that's through day or time of day specific trail use, user specific trails, or both. We can get these kids learning about conservation efforts as they build and maintain trails. And instead of passing along the attitude of, get off my lawn that many of these kids feel right now, which leads to rebellion and dangerous situations for themselves and others, we can build actual positive relationships and decrease user conflict if there's commitment to making changes and changing the methods we used from the past to the present. Scott?
All right, and our last slide, since this is being recorded and will be posted, we'll take a brief moment to make a shameless plug for folks that are looking to contact to either of the organizations that we come from and represent. So we thank you for taking the time to listen to our presentation. Hopefully that gives you a better feel for our perspective. There's a number of ways to improve the experience for all users. So we're looking forward to working towards collaborative solutions. And we hope that this is where the working group proceeds. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott and Helen, for walking us through some of those perspectives and also offering some food for thought as we move into our discussion groups. And I want to make sure that happens quickly. Just to let you know that we composed the breakout groups deliberately, so you'll find yourself in a room with a variety of folks from a variety of backgrounds. We did that intentionally. You'll also have a park district or MIG staff person taking notes on a Google Doc for you, so you can be free to just have the conversation, and they are self-facilitating. So we'll ask you all to be kind and facilitative in your discussions. There are 3 questions that we listed on the agenda that we'd like the groups to tackle, and you have 35 minutes overall. The first one is about sharing those experiences that bicyclists want to have, so understanding the goals of bicycling and how you relate to that experience. The second question, what are some of the issues that bicyclists experience and or create? So both as a what those issues are from the bicycle's perspective and what they cause sometimes in terms of issues. And then most importantly for our group is, we've given you a few ideas to consider about management strategies related to minimizing the conflicts and optimizing the experience. So please consider this an opportunity to explore some of those and generate some new ideas. So I think that's the overview. Each of you will be invited to join a breakout session momentarily, and please just click join, and we'll keep you updated as to the timing. We'd like to get back here about 11:35 in order to hear back from all of the groups. So Amanda, you want to do the distribution?
Before we change over just a second,
Yes.
I'm not sure, Lou, if you mentioned that each of the breakout groups will have a staff member who will be taking notes.
Right.
But we do want each of the breakout groups to select their own report back person, the person who will report back to the larger group at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms. Some people aren't logged in with the same email address that I have for them, so it's going to take me a few minutes to add those people into their specific groups. So if it takes you a minute to get put into a room, please just be patient. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.